When I married Ethan, I thought I was walking into the calm after years of storms. We'd met at a university reunion in Manchester. He was steady, funny, the kind of man who looked you straight in the eyes when he spoke. I'd lost my parents young, so when he said his mother was warm and family-oriented, I felt a quiet relief. Meeting Margaret, his mother, felt almost sacred to me. She greeted me at the door of her countryside home with a tray of lemon scones and a smile that could melt frost. "Oh, you're even lovelier than he said," she told me, cupping my hands between hers. I've always prayed Ethan would find someone grounded. In that moment, I believed I'd gained the mother figure I'd been missing. Our early months were peaceful. Ethan worked in software design, long hours but stable pay. I ran a small event planning business from home. Margaret often visited, bringing groceries and unsolicited advice about how to keep a man happy. Her words were old-fashioned, but her tone was kind, and I didn't mind. When I found out I was pregnant 6 months after our wedding, she was the first person I told, before Ethan even came home. She screamed so loud the cat darted under the sofa. "Oh, sweetheart, this baby will bring new light to this family," she said, pulling me into a hug that smelled of lavender and hand cream. Ethan was thrilled too, but Margaret took the news to another level. She started redecorating the guest room in soft yellows, brought prenatal vitamins, and attended every doctor's appointment she could. She was everywhere, so involved that sometimes I felt the lines between mother-to-be and grandmother-in-training blurred. At first, I took it as love. But now, looking back, I can see how subtly she was weaving control into every corner of our lives. It began with little things. "I'll handle the groceries this week," she said one Friday. "No need to waste money on those pricey organic brands." Or, "Don't stress about your business, dear. Clients will understand if you pause. You need rest, and Ethan will manage the bills." I didn't argue. She was older, wiser, and caring, or so I thought. When someone nurtures you, it's easy to mistake control for comfort. Then one evening, while Ethan worked late, she dropped by with tea in a thick folder. "I've been meaning to talk to you about something serious," she said. "You two are starting a family. You should think about your future, investments, security." She opened the folder to reveal glossy brochures for a property development in the Lake District, a new set of cottages meant for ecotourism. "It's the next big thing," she said. "I've already invested my savings, and the developer is offering family-only shares. If you two put in a small portion, just what you'd call a nest egg, you could double it within a year." Her voice was calm, persuasive. The way she explained it, it sounded foolproof. I hesitated. "I'll talk to Ethan about it," she smiled sweetly. "Of course, darling. But between us, he can be cautious. Sometimes a woman's intuition sees opportunities men don't. I didn't realize it then. But that was the first step of manipulation, planting seeds of secrecy between us. That night, Ethan came home exhausted. I brought up the idea gently, but he brushed it off. "We can look at investments later. Let's just focus on the baby." Still, Margaret's words echoed in my head. Women's intuition, family opportunity, future security. Over the next few weeks, she kept feeding the idea, texting me updates, showing me photos of construction progress, even inviting me to meet one of the supposed project managers. Her confidence made me trust her. After all, she was family. Finally, one afternoon, she caught me alone again. "If you're ready, I can take care of the paperwork. It's best to move quickly before prices rise," I signed. I didn't tell Ethan right away. I convinced myself it was a pleasant surprise for him later. From that point, our relationship grew even closer. She'd call me my girl and bring home-cooked meals. She promised that once the project matured, she'd open a trust fund for the baby. It felt like we were partners in something beautiful. Not just family, but builders of a shared future until the day she disappeared. It was a Sunday morning. I'd woken early, planning to bake blueberry muffins before Ethan got back from his weekend shift. My phone buzzed, a message from Margaret. "Going away for a few days, sweetheart. Don't worry, everything's fine. Take care of yourself and the baby," no punctuation. No heart emoji. Odd for her. At first, I brushed it off. But by evening, when Ethan tried calling her and the line went straight to voicemail, a pit formed in my stomach. He frowned. That's strange. She never turns her phone off. The next day, we got a letter, not handwritten but printed. It was from the property company. Dear investors, we regret to inform you that construction has been delayed indefinitely due to unforeseen circumstances. Ethan looked confused. Investors? What investors? My hands trembled. I think that means us. He stared at me. What do you mean us? That was the moment my perfect little world cracked open. The letter was only the beginning. Within 24 hours, our bank account would reveal a truth I wasn't ready to face, and the woman I'd called Mom would vanish without a trace. The morning after that letter arrived, I woke up with my heart pounding like I'd been running. Ethan was already downstairs, pacing the living room, the printed notice crushed in his hand. Investors? He said again, his voice tight. You need to tell me what this is, Claire. My throat felt dry. It's what your mom told me about. The property deal in the Lake District. She said it was family only. She promised it was safe. Ethan blinked hard, like he couldn't process what he'd just heard. You mean the one I said no to? I nodded weakly. He exhaled sharply and dropped onto the sofa. Jesus, Claire. How much did you put in? I whispered everything. Our savings. The silence that followed was suffocating. Even the clock on the wall seemed too loud. He looked at me, jaw clenched. You gave her all of it? Without even telling me? Tears welled up. I was trying to do something good for us. She always says, he interrupted, standing up. And you believed her over me? That cut deeper than I expected. I wanted to defend myself. To explain how convincing Margaret had been. The brochures. The fake calls, the warmth in her voice when she said, It's for the baby, sweetheart. But the words wouldn't come. I just sat there gripping my belly, feeling the baby kick beneath my hand. She wouldn't scam us, I said quietly, half believing it even as I said it. Ethan shook his head. Claire, she's gone. You don't just disappear after taking money if it's all legit. We spent the entire day calling her number. Straight to voicemail. Texts went unread. I even emailed her, then tried her Facebook. Nothing. That night, Ethan called the local police station. The officer on duty listened patiently, then said, Unless there's proof of criminal activity, sir, she's considered a missing adult by choice. You'll need to wait 48 hours. So we waited. 2 days felt like 2 years. Every time my phone buzzed, I jumped. Every knock on the door sent my heart racing. Finally, Ethan drove to her cottage an hour outside the city. He called me from the driveway. Her car's gone. Curtains shut. Mail's piling up. He paused. Claire, it looks like no one's been here for days. I felt dizzy. Maybe she's staying with someone? He was quiet for a long time. Then, there's a stack of opened envelopes on the porch, all addressed to her. From the same company name as the investment letters. When he got home, he dropped the envelopes on the table. One caught my eye. Final notice, account overdrawn. I unfolded it, my hands shaking. The balance was negative. Margaret hadn't just lost money. She was broke. Ethan's voice softened a little. Maybe she's in trouble, not hiding. I nodded, desperate to believe it. She wouldn't hurt us on purpose. She loves you, he looked down. That's what I used to think too. That night, neither of us could sleep. I kept scrolling through old photos, the baby shower plans she'd drawn, the ultrasound picture she'd framed. Everything felt tainted now. Around 2 a.m., Ethan whispered, What if she took the money to cover her own debts? The thought made my stomach twist. I'll go to the bank tomorrow, he said. We'll find out where it went. The next day, we sat in the bank manager's office, a tidy woman named Denise with sympathetic eyes. She pulled up our records and frowned. There were 3 transfers made in the last 2 weeks, all authorized online. Roughly the same total as your savings account. My voice trembled. But we didn't authorize any transfers. Denise hesitated. They were done from your account credentials, Mrs. Carter. I blinked. That's impossible. Then it hit me. Margaret had helped me set up our online banking months ago. She'd insisted it was safer for family emergencies. Denise lowered her voice. Each transfer went to a limited company registered under Marwell Holdings. I can flag this for investigation, but you may want to file a police report. Ethan was silent all the way home. When we finally pulled into the driveway, he sat in the car for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. I don't even know what to feel, he said. Angry, ashamed. She's my mother, Claire. I touched his arm. We'll figure it out. Together. He nodded, but his eyes were distant, like something inside him had cracked. That evening, I got a message from an unknown number. Claire, please don't hate me. I'll explain soon. Love, I froze. Ethan, she texted me. He grabbed the phone. Where's the number from? Unknown, I said. Maybe she's using a burner, he sighed. She's running, Claire. And she knows we'll come looking. I wanted to believe otherwise, but deep down, a part of me knew he was right. The next morning, Ethan filed an official report for fraud and disappearance. The officer asked endless questions, dates, amounts, contact details. At one point, he asked, "Do you think she could have planned this?" Ethan stared at the floor. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I think she planned everything." When we left the station, I could feel people staring at us, like we were characters in some small-town scandal. The woman whose mother-in-law ran off with her money. I'd gone from expecting a new life to watching the pieces of the old one crumble around me. That night, I sat on the porch holding my stomach, whispering to my unborn child, "We'll be okay, baby. I don't know how yet, but we'll be okay." And as I stared out into the dark, a strange thought crept in. Maybe this wasn't the first time Margaret had done something like this. Maybe I was just the latest in a long line of people she'd charmed and deceived. But 2 weeks later, when the police finally traced one of her transactions to a small motel outside Bristol, what they found there changed everything and proved that Margaret's plan went far deeper than just stolen money. 2 weeks later, the police called just after breakfast. The officer sounded neutral but firm. "Mrs. Carter, we've traced a transaction linked to your mother-in-law. She booked a room at a motel off the Bristol Road. We'd like you and your husband to come down to confirm some items." Ethan dropped his coffee mug. "I knew it," he muttered. "Let's go." The drive was long and quiet. Autumn rain streaked the windshield, and every mile felt like a countdown to something we didn't want to see. The motel was one of those cheap off-highway spots with a flickering vacancy sign and a gravel lot that smelled of diesel and wet earth. A detective named Harris met us in the lobby. He was young but looked like he'd seen too much. She checked in under an alias, Margie Wilson, using a prepaid card linked to your stolen funds, he said. She checked out 3 days ago but left some things behind. He led us to room 16. The air inside was stale and cold, as if someone had left the window open for days. There was a half-empty cup of tea on the table, a bottle of cheap perfume, and a small pile of paperwork on the bed. When I saw the paperwork, my knees nearly gave out. They were our bank statements. Every transfer highlighted in yellow. And on the last page, Margaret had scribbled in blue ink, "It was never about the money." Ethan picked it up, staring at the handwriting. "That's hers." "No doubt." I felt sick. "What does that even mean?" Detective Harris glanced around. "There's more." He opened the dresser drawer and pulled out a photo frame, our wedding picture. Margaret had cut Ethan out. Ethan stepped back like he'd been punched. "She brought that with her?" "Looks that way," Harris said. "She also left a rental agreement for a storage unit outside London. We think that's where she moved the rest of the funds and maybe some other documents." I could barely speak. "She planned all of this," he nodded. "She planned it well." That night, I lay awake in the hotel the police booked for us. Ethan sat by the window, his face lit by the soft glow of a street lamp. "She did this to us," he said quietly. "But why cut me out of the photo? Why just me?" I didn't answer. Because I was starting to see what he couldn't. that Margaret's love had always come with ownership. She wanted to be the one Ethan depended on, the one he owed everything to. My pregnancy, our marriage, even our savings had shifted that balance. And when she felt her control slipping, she did what manipulators do best. She took everything back. The next morning, we followed Detective Harris to the storage facility. A gray, soulless compound lined with metal doors and numbers stenciled in white. The manager looked nervous as he checked his clipboard. Yeah, Unit 104, rented 2 months ago under Margie Wilson. She paid cash for 3 months in advance. He handed Harris the key. Ethan and I stood back as the detective lifted the metal door. It creaked loudly, echoing through the corridor. Inside were cardboard boxes, a suitcase, and a metal filing cabinet. Harris snapped on his gloves and began opening each box carefully. The first was full of receipts and documents dating back 10 years. Different names, different addresses. She's been using aliases for a long time, he said. The second box stopped my breath. Inside were photos, family photos, but cut and pasted like collages. In every one, Margaret had positioned herself where I should have been, holding Ethan's arm, standing beside him at Christmas, cradling a baby doll wrapped in a blanket. Oh my God, I whispered. She was pretending to be me. Ethan looked pale. This is insane. The detective exchanged a worried glance with his partner. Looks like she's got some serious fixation issues. Harris kept digging until he found an envelope taped to the bottom of the suitcase. He handed it to me. My name was written on it in Margaret's familiar looped handwriting. I opened it with trembling fingers. Claire, you think I betrayed you, but I was protecting my son. You were never ready to be a mother. You spend money like water. You make decisions without thinking. I had to take control before you ruined his future. Don't look for me. When you learn gratitude, I'll return what's mine and yours. The room spun. She didn't think she was wrong. She thought she was saving us. Ethan snatched the letter. She's out of her mind, Harris sighed. We'll keep tracking her financial trail. But from this point, you should prepare for a long process. Fraud cases like this can take months, even years. Back home, the house felt different, like someone had scraped the warmth off its walls. Bills were stacking up, my business had stalled, and the baby was due in 3 months. Ethan and I barely spoke for days. Grief hung in the air, not just for the money lost, but for the trust shattered. One evening, I found him sitting in the nursery, staring at the empty crib. She's never coming back, is she? He asked. I sat beside him. I don't think so, he nodded slowly. Then we start over. Just you, me, and the baby. For the first time in weeks, I saw a flicker of hope in his eyes. And I knew that no matter what Margaret had taken, she couldn't touch that. But 3 months later, just as we were finally moving on, a package arrived on our doorstep with no return address, and inside was something that made me realize Margaret wasn't done with us yet. 3 months passed. The snow had melted, and so had the silence between Ethan and me. We'd rebuilt a fragile rhythm. Quiet breakfasts, gentle walks, doctor's appointments that didn't end in tears. The baby was due in just 6 weeks. For the first time since Margaret's disappearance, our life felt almost normal again. Then one cold Thursday morning, a brown parcel sat on our doorstep. No postage, no sender. Just my name written in black marker. Ethan frowned. You expecting something? I shook my head. Not that I know of. He reached down, picked it up, and turned it over. No return address? Weird. We carried it to the kitchen table. The box was small, about the size of a shoebox, and taped carefully. Something rattled inside. My stomach tightened. Maybe it's from your clients? He asked. I shook my head again. No, my clients don't drop things off by hand. Ethan grabbed a kitchen knife and sliced the tape. Inside was a layer of tissue paper, then an envelope, and under that, something soft wrapped in a faded baby blanket. My heart stopped. Ethan opened the envelope first. Inside was a folded note. Congratulations on the baby. I knew you'd manage without me, no signature. But the handwriting, elegant loops and that same lavender scent, left no doubt. It's her, I whispered. It's Margaret. Ethan's jaw tightened. What the hell? He unwrapped the blanket slowly. Inside was a tiny stuffed rabbit, the same one Margaret had bought when we first told her about the pregnancy. But it wasn't the toy that chilled me. It was what was pinned to its ear, a gold locket, engraved with my initials. Ethan looked at me, his eyes dark. She's watching us. We called Detective Harris immediately. Within an hour, he and another officer were sitting in our kitchen. Harris examined the package carefully, photographing every detail. She must have dropped it off overnight, he said. No fingerprints, no security footage from your street cameras. She's careful. Ethan paced. So she's here in town? Harris nodded. Probably. These kinds of messages are meant to provoke. She wants to remind you she's still in control. I swallowed hard. What does she want now? That's what we're going to find out, Harris said. We'll send the locket to forensics. Maybe she slipped up. After they left, I stood at the window, staring out at the quiet street. The neighbors' kids were playing on their bikes, laughter echoing down the block, so ordinary it almost hurt. My world felt small, cornered, unsafe. Ethan came up behind me. We can't let her scare us, Claire. She wants a reaction. I know, I whispered. But it's working. That night I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house made me jump. Around 3 a.m., I got up for a glass of water and noticed a car parked across the street. Black, tinted windows, engine off. I froze. It was there again the next night, by the third night. Ethan called the police, but by the time the patrol car arrived, the vehicle was gone. This is insane, he muttered. She's stalking us. I tried to stay calm, but my nerves were unraveling. Even the baby seemed restless, kicking more than usual, as if he could feel my anxiety. 2 days later, another envelope arrived, slipped under the door this time. Inside was a photo. It showed Ethan outside the hospital from last week carrying a diaper bag. Margaret had written on the back, "You look tired, son. Take care of my grandbaby," I dropped it. She's following us, Ethan. She's literally following us. He grabbed the photo, fury rising in his face. That's it. I'm ending this. What do you mean? I'm going to find her myself. The next morning he left early, saying he'd check the motels along the highway. I spent the day pacing, every hour feeling heavier. Around sunset, there was a knock at the door. My heart leapt, but it wasn't Ethan. It was Detective Harris. He looked grim. Your husband called me this morning before he left. Said he might have found something near Bristol. We've been trying to reach him for the last 2 hours. He's not picking up. The room spun. What do you mean, not picking up? His car was found at a rest stop just off the M5. No damage, doors locked, phone left inside. We're searching the area. I felt my knees buckle. No, this can't be happening. Harris put a hand on my shoulder. We'll find him. Don't panic yet. But how could I not? The pattern was clear. Margaret didn't just want money, she wanted control. She'd taken our peace, our safety, and now she was after him. The next 2 days blurred into each other. Police search teams combed the area, helicopters scanned nearby fields, but there was no trace of Ethan. I barely slept, barely ate. Then, on the third night, my phone rang. Unknown number, my hand shook as I answered. Hello? A familiar voice, calm, almost maternal. Claire, you really should have trusted me. It was Margaret. Where is he? I demanded. Where's Ethan? She chuckled softly. He's fine for now. He came looking for me, just like I knew he would. I told you, darling, everything I do is for family. Tears burned my eyes. You're sick. You stole from us, you destroyed everything. You'll understand someday, she said. You'll thank me when the truth comes out. Truth? What truth? But the line went dead. I stood there, gripping the phone, heart pounding. The truth. What truth could possibly justify this? When I told Harris, he immediately traced the call. It had come from a disposable phone near a small coastal town 2 hours away. He looked at me seriously. Claire, if she's with him, this isn't just financial anymore. It's personal. That night, I sat on the nursery floor, staring at the half-painted walls, the little crib waiting quietly. I whispered to the baby, "We're going to bring him home." I promise, I didn't know how, but I meant it. Margaret had played her game too long. It was time to end it. The next morning, I packed a bag, printed every clue we had, and got in the car. If the police couldn't find her fast enough, I would. I didn't care what it took. I was going to bring my husband back and make Margaret face what she'd done. I drove before sunrise, the road stretching ahead like a long gray ribbon under a pale sky. The air was cold, sharp enough to sting my lungs. Every mile felt heavier, not just from the pregnancy pressing against my ribs, but from the fear that I might be too late. The coastal town Detective Harris mentioned was quiet that morning, tucked between wind-battered cliffs and faded shop fronts. A place where everyone seemed to know each other, the kind of town where a stranger stood out. I parked near a cafe, pulled my hood over my head, and started showing Ethan's picture around. "Sorry, haven't seen him," said a man sweeping the sidewalk. "Looks like a nice guy, though." A waitress looked longer at the photo. "He was here, I think," she said slowly. "A few days ago." Sat by the window, looked upset. He asked if anyone knew a lady named Margaret. Left before I could bring his coffee. My pulse quickened. "Do you know where he went?" She shook her head. "But he dropped this." She reached behind the counter and handed me a small folded receipt from a nearby petrol station. It wasn't much, but it was something. The station was only 5 minutes away. When I showed the attendant Ethan's photo, his expression changed. "Yeah, I remember him. Came in early evening, filled up his tank, asked for directions to Cliffside Lodge." My heart nearly stopped. "Where's that?" He pointed toward the cliffs. "Old guest house by the sea. Used to be popular, but it's half empty now. Bit creepy, if you ask me." I thanked him and drove toward the coast. The road grew narrower, the sea louder, the wind stronger. Then, through the mist, I saw it. A worn wooden sign swinging from rusty chains. Cliffside Lodge. The place looked abandoned. Half the windows were boarded up and the paint peeled like sunburned skin. But one window upstairs glowed faintly yellow. Someone was there. I pulled into the gravel lot and killed the engine. My hands were shaking as I stepped out. I could taste salt on my lips. The front door was locked, so I walked around the side, where a faint trail of footprints led through the wet sand toward a smaller cottage beside the main lodge. As I got closer, I heard voices, muffled, tense. One of them was Ethan's. I froze behind the wall, listening. "Mom, please," he was saying, voice hoarse. "You don't have to do this." Then Margaret, calm, steady, almost soothing. "You came to find me, didn't you?" "I told you everything I did was for your future. You'll see that someday." Ethan's tone cracked. "You stole from us. You lied. You scared Claire half to death. I protected you," she said. "She doesn't love you like I do. She only wants what she lost." I could hear something crash, maybe a chair knocked over. My heart hammered so hard it hurt. That was enough. I stepped out from behind the wall and shouted, "Margaret!" There was a stunned silence. Then the door creaked open and she appeared. She looked older, thinner, her hair messy, eyes wild, but still eerily composed. She smiled faintly. "You shouldn't be here, Claire. Not in your condition. Where is he?" I demanded. Her smile faded. "Inside, safe for now. But you need to leave. Not without him." Her hand twitched near her pocket. I didn't see a weapon, but I could feel danger in her stillness. "I tried to warn you," she said softly. "You don't understand the truth." "Then tell me." Her voice broke for the first time. "He was supposed to marry someone else. Someone his father promised me he'd take care of. But you came along and you ruined everything." My breath caught. "This isn't about money, is it?" She laughed on a dry, hollow sound. "Money was just a tool. I wanted to fix the future." "My future? His? The baby's." I stepped closer. "You need help, Margaret. Please, let him go." For a moment, she looked almost fragile, like the woman who once baked lemon scones for me. But then her expression hardened. "You'll thank me one day," she said again, and turned toward the door. That's when Ethan appeared behind her. His face was pale, a small cut on his cheek. "Claire," he said, voice trembling. "Call the police, now." Before I could move, Margaret lunged for him. He pushed her away and she stumbled, hitting the table and knocking over a lamp. It shattered, sparking against the old carpet. "Mom, stop!" he shouted, trying to help her up. But she shoved him back. Smoke started curling from the floorboards. "Ethan, we have to go!" I screamed. He grabbed my hand, dragging me toward the door. Margaret stood frozen, staring at the flames licking the edge of the curtain. "Mom, come with us." She shook her head slowly. "No, it ends here." The fire spread fast. Ethan pulled me outside as the cottage filled with smoke. I looked back one last time. Margaret standing in the glow, face calm, eyes locked on us as if she'd finally accepted something she couldn't change. Then the roof gave way, and she was gone. We called the fire department, but by the time they arrived, there wasn't much left. The investigators found what was left of the safe she'd kept in the corner. Half-melted cash, torn papers, burnt jewelry. Ethan and I sat on the sand, wrapped in blankets, watching the flames die out. He didn't speak for a long time. When he finally did, his voice was quiet, broken. "She wasn't evil," he said. "Just lost. Maybe too lost to come back." I nodded, tears streaming down my face. "She wanted control more than love, and that destroyed her." He put his arm around me gently. "Not us, though. Not anymore." The sky was starting to lighten, soft orange rising over the water. It felt like an ending, but also something close to peace. For weeks, I thought the nightmare was over, until a letter arrived from the county coroner's office, saying something that made me question everything we'd just survived. 3 weeks after the fire, life settled into a strange calm. Ethan and I moved back home, trying to breathe again, trying to believe it was really over. The investigators had ruled the fire accidental. Margaret's remains were identified through dental records. The police closed the case, and Detective Harris called it a tragic conclusion. But nothing about it felt like closure. Ethan was quieter than ever. Some nights I'd wake to find him sitting in the dark, staring at the baby's crib, the same haunted look in his eyes. The guilt was eating him alive. "I keep thinking I could have done something," he said one evening. "Got her out. Talked her down." I reached for his hand. "You tried, Ethan. She made her choice." He looked at me, eyes red. "That's the problem, Claire. It shouldn't have been her choice." A month later, the baby came. A healthy boy with a full head of dark hair. We named him Samuel after my late father. The house filled with warmth again. For a moment, it almost felt normal. Bottles, soft blankets, late-night cries. Ethan smiled more now. He'd hold Sam against his chest and whisper, "We're gonna do better, buddy. We'll give you the life Mom couldn't handle." But the peace didn't last. One morning, while I was feeding Sam, a thick envelope arrived in the mail. The return address read Bristol County Coroner's Office. I frowned. "Ethan, did you request something?" He looked up from the couch. "No, why?" I tore it open. Inside were several official-looking papers and a letter clipped on top. "Mrs. Carter, we're forwarding copies of recent forensic updates regarding the case of Margaret Ellis. Please note that certain discrepancies have been identified and may require further review." I scanned the next page, and my breath caught. No conclusive DNA match confirmed. Partial dental alignment only. Additional verification recommended. My hands trembled. "Ethan." He took the papers, eyes narrowing as he read. Then he whispered, "You're kidding me." "They're saying it might not be her," I said, my voice breaking. "It might not have been her body in that fire." Ethan stood up slowly, shaking his head. No, that's impossible. The investigators confirmed it. Harris confirmed it. But the report says they only matched dental fragments, not DNA." He rubbed his temples. "You think she faked her death?" The question hung between us like smoke. Detective Harris met us later that afternoon at the station. When I showed him the letter, his expression darkened. "I didn't see this," he admitted. "We were told the case was closed and the remains were hers. But if this is true, she might have staged it." Ethan leaned forward. "How? The fire was huge." Harris nodded. "Yes, but we only found partial remains. If she planned the fire, she could have swapped dental records or used someone else's ID. Wouldn't be the first time. She already had fake names and accounts." I felt cold all over. "So she's still out there?" "We can't confirm that yet," he said carefully. "But if she is, she's keeping her distance for now." Ethan slammed his fist lightly against the table. "She's been one step ahead from the start," Harris sighed. "I'll reopen the case quietly. But I need you both to stay alert. If she contacts you again, call me immediately." That night, neither of us spoke much. Sam slept between us in his bassinet, small and peaceful, unaware of the storm brewing above him. At midnight, Ethan broke the silence. "If she's alive, what does she want now?" I stared at the ceiling. "Control. She's always wanted control." He looked at me, voice low. "Then she'll come back for him." The thought made my blood run cold. A week passed. Nothing. No letters, no strange calls, no sightings. We started to believe maybe she really was gone. Maybe the coroner's report was just a clerical error. Then one evening I got a text from an unknown number. "How's my grandson?" I dropped the phone. My hands went cold. Ethan grabbed it and stared at the message, his jaw tightening. "That's her." Before we could respond, another message arrived. "You can't hide from family, Claire. I told you I'd be watching." Ethan immediately called Harris, but the number was already disconnected. The detective traced it later. A prepaid phone, bought in a small town 2 hours north. No cameras, no leads. I started double-locking the doors, keeping the curtains drawn. Every time the wind hit the house, I jumped. Still, there was a part of me, a small, fearful part, that didn't doubt for a second that she was alive. Margaret was too cunning, too methodical to die in her own fire, and now she knew about Sam. 2 weeks later, Ethan left early to pick up groceries. He called me on the way home, voice calm, light-hearted. "You want anything sweet? Maybe those cookies you like." I laughed softly. "Sure, get 2 packs. Sam's been good today." "Good," he said. "See you soon," but an hour passed. Then another. His phone went to voicemail. By sunset, panic clawed at my chest. I called Harris, who immediately sent a patrol car to trace his route. At 9 p.m., my phone buzzed, not from Ethan, but from another unknown number. A picture appeared. It showed Ethan's car parked in a field, headlights off. The caption read, "We're a family again," I screamed. Harris was at the house within minutes, taking the phone from my trembling hands. "We'll find him," he said firmly. "I promise you, Claire, we'll bring him home." But deep down, I knew what the message meant. Margaret was alive. And this time, she wasn't just after money. She was after everything I had left. 2 days later, I received a video file that confirmed every nightmare I'd ever had about her, and proved that Margaret's game was only getting started. 2 mornings after that message, I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing on the nightstand. I grabbed it before it could wake Sam. A new notification blinked on the screen. 1 video received. No number, no sender name. Just a gray bubble and a timestamp. My heart pounded. I hesitated, thumb hovering over the play button. A part of me wanted to throw the phone across the room, pretend it wasn't real. But fear and desperation pushed me to tap it. The video opened to a shaky image, the interior of an old barn or shed. Light flickered through the gaps in the wooden boards. The camera panned slowly and stopped. Ethan. He was sitting in a chair, wrists tied, a bruise on his jaw but alive. His eyes looked straight into the camera. "Claire," he said, voice trembling, "I'm okay. Don't panic. Just do what she says." Behind him, I caught a glimpse of someone, the hem of a dark coat, a hand brushing his shoulder. Then Margaret stepped into frame. She looked nothing like the woman I once knew. Her hair was cropped short, uneven. Her face was leaner, harder. But her voice, that calm, motherly tone, hadn't changed. "Hello, Claire," she said, smiling faintly. "I told you we'd see each other again. You didn't believe me." My stomach twisted. "You've been busy, haven't you?" she continued. "Raising my grandson, rebuilding your life. Acting like none of this ever happened." I could hear Ethan struggling behind her. "Mom, stop this, please," she ignored him. "You took everything from me, Claire. My son, my family, my trust. So now I'm taking back what's mine." She leaned closer to the camera, eyes sharp. "You have 24 hours to bring the baby to the old house in Brookhaven. Alone. No police. If you do, Ethan goes free. If you don't..." She tilted the camera toward Ethan, who flinched as she pulled something metallic from her coat. "Don't test me," she said softly. "You know I always keep my promises." Then the screen went black. My hands were shaking so violently I almost dropped the phone. "No, no, no." Sam started crying from the crib. I picked him up, holding him tight, trying not to let him feel the panic tearing through me. By the time Detective Harris arrived, I was pacing the living room, the video replaying in my mind on a loop. He watched it in silence, then exhaled through his teeth. "She's escalating. This isn't about money anymore. This is obsession. She wants the baby," I said quietly. "She wants to start over, with him." Harris nodded grimly. "She's trying to force a trade." But she slipped up. "Look here." He paused the video and zoomed in on the background. A rusted red tractor sat behind Ethan. "That's not random. Only a few farms around here use that model. I'll get a team searching the area immediately." He looked me straight in the eye. "Claire, you need to stay inside, doors locked." She's unpredictable, I wanted to agree. I wanted to stay safe. But all I could think about was Ethan tied up somewhere, terrified. When Harris left, I sat on the floor, holding Sam and crying silently. I'd lost too much already. I wasn't losing Ethan, too. That night, I made a decision. I packed a small bag, diapers, formula, a flashlight, my phone. I tucked Sam into his car seat and whispered, "We're going to bring Daddy home." Before leaving, I wrote a note for Harris, explaining everything. Where I was going, why I couldn't wait. I left it on the kitchen table. The drive to Brookhaven was long and lonely. The town had changed, most of it abandoned, swallowed by overgrown fields and silence. Margaret's old house sat at the end of a dirt road, its roof sagging, windows boarded. As I pulled up, fog rolled across the grass. I could hear the faint crash of waves against distant rocks. It felt like the world was holding its breath. I left Sam in the back seat, the doors locked, heater on low. "Mommy's going to bring Daddy back, okay? Stay right here." He cooed softly, unaware of the danger around him. I took a deep breath and stepped out. The front door creaked open with one push. Inside smelled like dust and decay. I could hear faint movement deeper in the house. A floorboard creak, a whisper of fabric. "Margaret?" I called out. My voice echoed through the halls. "I'm here." Silence. Then a familiar laugh. Soft, controlled. "You really came," she said, stepping out from the shadows. "I knew you would." Her eyes flicked past me toward the car outside. "Is he here?" I swallowed. "Let me see Ethan first." She tilted her head. "Always making demands, aren't you?" "Please," I whispered. "I just want to see him." She studied me for a long moment, then smiled. "Fine, follow me." She led me down the narrow hallway into what used to be her living room. The walls were covered in old photos, family pictures, but they'd been altered. My face had been cut out of everyone, replaced with hers. Ethan sat tied to a chair in the corner, pale but breathing. "Claire?" He gasped when he saw me. "Don't move," Margaret warned, pulling a small revolver from her pocket. "We're going to fix this once and for all." I raised my hand slowly. "You don't have to do this." Her voice trembled. "You ruined everything. But maybe I can still save him." Maybe I can still save my family. Margaret, listen. A sudden noise outside, a car door slamming. Then flashing lights through the window, Margaret's eyes widened. You called them! I didn't, I shouted. I swear I didn't. But it was too late. The front door burst open and officers flooded in. Drop the weapon, one shouted. Margaret froze, looking from me to Ethan, then down at the gun. For a split second, I saw the same sorrow in her eyes I'd once mistaken for love. Then she whispered, You never should have trusted me, and raised the gun. A shot rang out, everything blurred. Shouting, movement, the sharp smell of gunpowder. When the noise finally died, Margaret was on the floor, motionless. The officers rushed to untie Ethan, who stumbled into my arms. It's over, he whispered, voice breaking. It's finally over. But even as he said it, I wasn't sure I believed him, because Margaret had always planned ahead, and I couldn't shake the feeling that she had one last move left to play. The next morning, as police searched the property, they discovered a hidden basement beneath the floorboards. And what they found down there proved that Margaret's story was far darker than anyone imagined. By morning, the house was surrounded by yellow tape and uniformed officers. The early light slanted through the shattered windows, catching in the dust that still hung thick in the air. I stood in the doorway, wrapped in a blanket, holding a cup of tea that had long gone cold. Ethan sat beside me, quiet, pale, staring at nothing. Detective Harris was there, his notebook open, eyes sharp but tired. He'd been on scene since dawn. They're doing one last sweep, he said softly. It'll be over soon. I nodded, though my chest felt hollow. Margaret's body had been taken away hours ago, zipped into a black bag. I'd thought that would bring closure, but instead, it left a heavier silence. One that seemed to breathe in the walls. I couldn't stop looking at the living room where it had ended. The photos she'd altered. My face torn out, her smile pressed in its place. It didn't feel like madness. It felt like obsession. And obsession always left traces. Harris turned to one of the forensics officers. Anything in the crawl spaces? The man shook his head. Nothing yet. We're checking the subfloor next. Subfloor? I asked. He pointed toward the far corner of the room. The one where the boards were slightly darker, uneven. Old house like this, there's usually a maintenance crawl or cellar under there. I felt a chill run down my spine. She used to call that her quiet corner. Said it was where she went to pray. Ethan glanced at me. I never knew that. Neither did I murmured. A few minutes later, the officers began prying up the old planks. The sound of crowbars and cracking wood filled the air, followed by a low gasp from one of the men. Sir, you better see this, he called to Harris. We stepped closer. Beneath the boards was a narrow staircase descending into darkness. A faint metallic smell drifted up, something cold and unpleasant. Stay here, Harris warned, but I couldn't. No, I said firmly. I need to see. He studied me for a moment, then nodded. Fine, but stay behind me. We descended slowly, the flashlight beams bouncing off damp concrete walls. The air grew colder with each step, thick with mildew and something else, something faintly chemical. At the bottom was a small basement room. Old shelves lined the walls filled with boxes, glass jars, and stacks of yellowed notebooks. In the corner sat a single wooden chair, and beside it, a crib, a baby's crib. My heart clenched. It was old, dusty, covered in cobwebs, but the blanket inside looked new, pale blue, neatly folded. Oh my God, I whispered. Ethan's voice cracked. What is this place? Harris crouched beside one of the boxes, pulling it open carefully. Inside were newspaper clippings. Missing child, 1987, local woman claims adoption fraud, infant found, mother still missing. Margaret kept these? I asked. He nodded slowly. Looks like it. Ethan picked up one of the notebooks. It was filled with Margaret's handwriting, obsessive loops and crossed-out lines. He was mine first. I was supposed to be the one. They took him from me, but I'll start again. I'll rebuild my family. I felt a cold wave roll through me. She was writing about you, Ethan. He flipped another page. The handwriting got shakier, almost frantic. Claire doesn't understand. She'll ruin everything. But once the baby comes, things will be perfect again. I'll finally have what I lost. Ethan dropped the book, trembling. She wasn't trying to hurt us. She was trying to replace something. Harris stood, expression grim. Looks like she'd been reliving an old trauma for decades. The adoption article. It's from her hometown. We'll need to pull her records. I stepped closer to the crib, running my fingers across the blanket. She kept this place ready. Like she was waiting. The silence was thick. Even the officers had stopped moving. Then Harris noticed something else. A small metal lockbox beneath the chair. He forced it open carefully. Inside were old photographs. Not ours, not Ethan's. And a single birth certificate. The name read Ethan Ellis. But the parents listed weren't Margaret and her husband. They were completely different names. What is this? Ethan whispered. Harris frowned. Looks like she wasn't your biological mother. Ethan's breath caught. That can't be right. But the proof was right there, ink faded but clear. Another paper beneath it, an adoption record dated when Ethan was 2 years old. She stole you? I said softly, realization sinking in. She didn't lose a child, she took one. Ethan stepped back, shaking his head. No, that's impossible. But deep down, I could see he knew. The way she'd always talked about fate, about how she'd chosen him, how she never let him drift too far. It all made sense now. Margaret hadn't been just controlling. She'd been hiding the truth her entire life. Upstairs, the morning light grew stronger, cutting through the boarded windows. The officers gathered the evidence, sealing boxes, photographing the scene. Ethan sat on the last stair, silent, face pale. She wasn't my mother, he whispered finally. And she spent her whole life pretending she was. I knelt beside him, my hand on his shoulder. She couldn't handle losing control. Maybe she thought keeping you meant she'd never lose anything again. He looked at me, eyes tired. Then why take the money? Why all of this? Because when her secret started falling apart, I said, she did what she always did. She tried to rebuild her lie. Harris stepped forward, holding the documents. We'll need DNA testing to confirm, but it's consistent with the old kidnapping report. I'm sorry, son. Ethan didn't respond. He just stared at the floor, lost in a silence that felt years deep. Later, when everyone left, I stood alone by the open floor, staring down into the shadows below. The crib, the notebooks, the faint echo of Margaret's voice still seemed to linger there. I whispered, "You never wanted to hurt him. But you did anyway." Then I covered the hole with a tarp and turned off the light. That night, while putting Sam to sleep, I noticed something tucked into his blanket, a folded piece of paper that hadn't been there before. The handwriting was unmistakable. It was just after midnight when I found it. The house was quiet, too quiet, except for the soft hum of the baby monitor. I'd just finished nursing Sam and was tucking the blanket around him when my fingers brushed against something stiff. At first, I thought it was just a tag or receipt. But when I pulled it out, my breath caught. A folded piece of paper, aged, creased, faintly smelling of lavender. Margaret's scent. For a long moment, I just stared at it, frozen. My first thought was impossible. The police had been through everything. The house was sealed, checked, cleared. There was no way anyone could have planted it. And yet, here it was, inside my son's blanket. My hands trembled as I unfolded the note. The handwriting was the same looping script I'd seen in her journals, steady and graceful despite its madness. A mother never leaves her child. No greeting. No explanation. Just that one sentence. I sank into the rocking chair, staring at the words until they blurred. My throat tightened, my heartbeat rising to a sharp thud. Ethan was asleep upstairs, finally after days of restless pacing. I didn't want to wake him, but the fear pressing against my chest was too much. I climbed the stairs slowly, still clutching the note. He was half asleep when I whispered, "Ethan." She left us something. His eyes opened instantly. "What do you mean?" I handed him the paper. He squinted at it, then looked at me. "Where did you find this?" "In Sam's blanket." He sat up straight. "That's not possible. The police—" "I know. But it was there, Ethan, it was there." He rubbed his face, groaning softly. "Maybe it's old. Maybe she hid it before the police found the basement." "She didn't know about Sam's blanket," I said, my voice shaking. "That blanket came from the hospital after she was gone." He froze, staring at me like the truth was slowly dawning and he didn't want to believe it. "You think she's still alive?" he said finally. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. The look in my eyes told him everything. The next morning, we called Detective Harris. He arrived within the hour, his expression grim when I showed him the note. "We sealed every inch of that property," he said. "No one's been inside since the investigation." Ethan folded his arms. "So how did this end up in our baby's crib?" Harris didn't answer right away. He studied the paper carefully. "This ink is fresh. Not old," my stomach dropped. "Fresh, as in written recently," he said. "This wasn't from before the fire?" Ethan swore under his breath and began pacing. "She's toying with us again. She's probably been watching, waiting." Harris nodded slowly. "If she's alive, she's keeping close. But we'll need proof. I'll set up surveillance, cameras, marked patrols. Until then, keep your doors locked, stay alert, and don't go anywhere alone." I could only nod. After he left, I sat by the window, staring out at the quiet street. Every car that passed, every rustle in the trees made my heart skip. The note sat on the table, that single line echoing in my mind. A mother never leaves her child. That evening, Ethan and I tried to convince ourselves it was just a leftover scrap from the investigation. We put Sam to bed early, double-checked the locks, and turned in for the night. But sometime around 2 a.m., I woke to a faint sound, the baby monitor crackling. At first, it was just static. Then softly, a voice, humming a tune I knew. It was the same lullaby Margaret used to hum when she'd visit. Soft, lilting, sweet, like a ghost brushing the edge of memory. I froze. Every muscle in my body locked. "Ethan," I whispered. "Wake up," he stirred, mumbling. "What is it?" "Listen." The lullaby continued, faint but unmistakable, drifting through the monitor. He sat up instantly, eyes wide. I know." He grabbed his phone and pulled up the camera feed from the nursery. The screen flickered, black and white static, glitching, then for a brief second an image appeared, a shadow at the crib. A woman's outline. Then the screen went dark. I screamed and ran down the hall. Ethan followed, flashlight in hand. When we burst into the nursery, the window was open, curtains fluttering, cold air pouring in. Sam was crying, but unharmed. The room smelled faintly of lavender. Ethan checked the yard, but there were no footprints, no signs of entry. It was as if she'd vanished into thin air. He came back inside, chest heaving. "There's nothing out there." "She was here," I whispered. "I saw her on the monitor." "I know what I saw too," he said. "She's alive, Claire. She's alive." The next day, Harris returned with a forensics team. They checked the window frame, the floor, the blanket, everything. When the results came back, there was only one print on the windowsill. Partial, faint, but clear enough to analyze. It matched Margaret Ellis. Ethan and I sat in stunned silence as Harris read the report. "She's not dead," he said quietly. "The DNA from the fire, it must have been someone else. But how?" I asked, voice breaking. "How could she survive that?" Harris shook his head. "She planned it, Claire. Probably had help. Maybe she paid someone to fake the death scene. She wanted you to stop looking." Ethan stood, fists clenched. "Then we find her." "Careful," Harris warned. She's unpredictable, and now she's crossed a line. He paused, looking at me. She's fixated on you. The note wasn't for Ethan, it was for you. I swallowed hard. Why me? He met my eyes. Because you have what she wants. The life, the child, the love she could never keep. That night, I sat in Sam's room long after he fell asleep. The moonlight spilled across his tiny face, calm and innocent. But I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. That somewhere, Margaret was out there waiting for her next move. The monitor glowed softly beside me, steady and silent this time. I should have felt comforted. But instead, I felt the weight of her words pressing down like a curse. A mother never leaves her child. And I knew, deep in my bones, she wasn't done. 2 days later, Detective Harris called with new evidence from the burned house, something hidden beneath the floorboards of the basement that revealed exactly how far Margaret's obsession had gone, and who had been helping her all along. The call came early, just after dawn. Detective Harris's voice sounded rough, like he hadn't slept. "Claire, we found something," he said. "You and Ethan should come in." My stomach tightened. "What kind of something?" There was a pause. "You'd better see it yourself." By the time we reached the station, a pale winter sun was creeping over the horizon. The world outside looked calm, normal, cars passing, people walking dogs, but inside the walls of that station, normal no longer existed. Harris met us in a small conference room. On the table lay a sealed evidence bag and a manila folder. "We reopened the house after your call," he began. While checking beneath the basement floorboards, we found another compartment. Someone had built a false layer under the concrete. Ethan frowned. "What was in it?" Harris slid the folder toward us. These, inside, were photographs. Old, faded, the edges curled. Margaret stood in most of them. Younger, sharper-eyed, dressed neatly. But she wasn't alone. A man was beside her in almost every picture. He was tall, gray-haired, with deep-set eyes that looked unsettlingly familiar. "Who is that?" I asked. Harris flipped over one of the photos where a date was scribbled, 2016, and a name, Dr. Samuel Pierce. "Doctor?" Ethan repeated. "Like a medical doctor?" "Psychiatrist," Harris said. "Margaret's old therapist. He lost his license a few years ago for falsifying patient records. Looks like he and your mother kept in contact after that." Ethan leaned forward. "You're saying my mother was seeing this man?" "She was more than seeing him," Harris said quietly. "We found dozens of letters between them. He wasn't treating her. He was helping her." I felt my skin crawl. "Helping her do what?" Harris opened another bag. Inside were small cassette tapes labeled with dates. Therapy sessions at first glance. He pushed a player across the table. "Listen." The tape clicked and whirred, and then Margaret's voice filled the room. Soft, steady, controlled. "She doesn't deserve him, Sam. She's making him weak. I can see it happening." Then a man's voice, calm, professional, with a faint amusement. "You know what to do when someone threatens your foundation, Margaret. Reclaim control. Reshape the situation," she laughed lightly. "You make it sound so simple." "It is simple," he replied. "Control the narrative, control the people. That's how you heal." The tape clicked off. Ethan sat back, pale. "He encouraged her," Harris nodded. "He didn't just encourage her. He financed her fake identities, arranged medical records for her deaths, and helped her relocate between towns. We think he's the one who staged the fire." I felt the blood drain from my face. "So she didn't do it alone?" "No," Harris said grimly. "She had help. And based on the latest evidence, he's still out there." That night, I couldn't shake the image of that man's face. Something about it lingered. The confidence in his smile, the calm in his eyes. Ethan sat beside me on the couch, silent for a long time. Finally, he said, "She wasn't crazy, not completely. He made her this way." I looked at him. "Maybe, but she chose to follow him." He nodded slowly, eyes distant. I keep thinking about all those times she told me she was getting advice. She said she was working through things. Working through things? He swallowed hard. That's what she called it, therapy. But now I wonder if she was meeting him all along. I leaned against him. If he's alive, he'll come back. He's part of her story. And now ours. 3 days later, Harris called again. We got a hit on Pierce's credit activity. He used a prepaid card near a rest area north of Birmingham. We're sending a team. Ethan and I exchanged a glance. Do you think he's coming for us? I asked. Not yet, Harris said. But he's watching. These types always circle back to what they started. The call ended, but my mind kept spinning. Watching. Waiting. Those words felt like shadows crawling along the walls. That night, as I rocked Sam to sleep, I thought about Margaret's note. A mother never leaves her child. What if that message wasn't just from her? What if it was from him too? The next morning, I opened my laptop to check an email from one of my clients. But instead of the usual inbox, a new message sat at the top. No sender. No subject. I hesitated, then clicked. Inside was a single line. Control the narrative, control the people. I gasped and slammed the laptop shut. Ethan rushed over. What is it? I opened it again, but the message was gone. Deleted. No trace, no sender. Ethan grabbed my hand. He's reaching out. He knows we found him. I felt cold all over. Harris said he was still out there. He must be closer than we thought. We called the detective immediately. He promised to send tech support to trace the email, but something in his voice told me he already knew what that meant. Pierce was taunting us. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I walked through the house, checking locks, looking out windows. Every noise felt deliberate, every shadow familiar. When I passed the nursery, I paused. Sam slept soundly, his tiny chest rising and falling. I reached down and brushed his hair gently, whispering, "You're safe, baby. I'll keep you safe." But then I noticed it, a small envelope tucked into the corner of his crib. My pulse spiked. I reached for it slowly, afraid of what I'd find. Inside was a photograph. It showed Margaret and Dr. Pierce, standing in front of a hospital, holding a newborn baby wrapped in a white blanket. On the back, written in Margaret's delicate handwriting, "He was never yours." I staggered back, gripping the crib. My mind reeled, the message, the baby, the photo. It couldn't mean what I thought it meant. But deep down, I already knew. The truth Margaret had hidden wasn't just about Ethan. It was about Sam. The next morning, DNA results from the coroner's office confirmed what I feared most, and revealed that Margaret and Dr. Pierce had one final secret that would destroy everything we believed about our family. I don't remember driving to the station that morning. One moment, I was holding the photograph with trembling hands. The next, I was sitting in Detective Harris's office, the world around me spinning while his words cut through the haze. "The DNA tests came back," he said carefully. "You might want to sit down." Ethan was already seated, pale, silent. I could feel his heartbeat through the floor, fast, uneven, terrified. Harris laid 2 documents on the table. The first confirms what we suspected. The body in the fire was not Margaret Ellis. The second... He hesitated, his voice tightening. "It's about the child." I felt my breath catch. "What about him?" "The sample you gave us from Sam's hospital blood work," Harris said, sliding the second report forward, "doesn't match Ethan's DNA." The world went very still. "What?" I whispered. Harris's eyes softened. "Genetically, he's not Ethan's son." Ethan's hands clenched on the table. "That's impossible." "He's ours." "He's yours in every way that matters," Harris said. "But biologically, his DNA shows markers consistent with the samples we recovered from Margaret's house, the ones belonging to Dr. Pierce." The air left my lungs. My voice came out in fragments. "You're saying that Pierce is Sam's father," Harris finished quietly. Ethan stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. No, that can't be right." "I'm sorry," Harris said. But there's more. He opened another file. Photos, hospital records, falsified forms. We traced your medical records, Claire. The lab samples from your prenatal checkups were altered. Someone switched the vials during your second trimester. We compared the signatures, all falsified by Dr. Pierce. My chest tightened until I could barely breathe. You're saying he did something to me? We think he manipulated the fertility treatments, Harris said softly. He'd been following your case since before the pregnancy, likely through Margaret. He wanted control of your family, your child. And he made sure that when the baby was born, it would connect all of you forever. Ethan's face went white. So Margaret, she knew. She may not have known everything, Harris said. But she trusted him. He promised her a legacy, a way to rebuild what she'd lost. And she believed the child would belong to both of them. I felt sick. The room blurred. Every breath felt heavy and sharp. He used me. He used all of us. Back home, silence filled every corner. The photograph lay on the kitchen counter. Margaret and Pierce smiling, holding a baby that looked too much like Sam. Ethan sat at the table, head in his hands. I can't believe this, he whispered. All this time, I thought she just wanted control. But this is madness. I stared at Sam sleeping in his bassinet, his small hands curled into fists. He looked so peaceful, so innocent, unaware of the nightmare swirling around him. He's still ours, I said softly. No matter how he came into this world, he's ours. Ethan nodded, but his eyes were distant. Yeah, but I can't stop thinking, how much of him is them? I touched his shoulder. Don't do that. Don't make him carry their sins. He looked at me, tears glinting in his eyes. You don't understand. If Pierce planned this, if he's still out there, I finished for him. Then he won't stop until he takes him. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the nursery with the lights off, rocking slowly, listening to the hum of the monitor. Every sound made me jump. The house creaking, the wind pressing against the windows, the faint rustle of branches outside. Around 3 a.m., my phone buzzed. A new message. He's perfect, isn't he? No number. No name, just that. I froze, staring at the screen. Then another message appeared. You should thank me, Claire. Without me, he wouldn't exist. My hands shook. I typed back before I could think. Where are you? What do you want? No reply for a full minute. Then, I want my son. My throat closed. I called Harris immediately, forwarding the messages. Within an hour, a patrol car was parked outside, but it didn't calm me. Because if Pierce had access to our numbers, our home, our lives, then he was closer than anyone realized. By morning, the police had traced the messages to a tower near the northern docks, the same area where Pierce once owned a small medical clinic. Ethan grabbed his jacket. I'm going there, I stopped him. You can't, it's dangerous. He turned, eyes hard. He used you, Claire. He violated everything sacred. I won't let him keep doing this. I'm not letting you go alone. Someone has to stay with Sam. We stared at each other, the truth hanging heavy between us. He was right, I whispered. Then be careful. He kissed Sam's forehead, then mine, and left without another word. The hours stretched endlessly. The police promised to keep me updated, but time moved like molasses. I sat by the window, clutching Sam, waiting for the phone to ring. When it finally did, I nearly dropped it. Harris's voice was tight, urgent. Claire, we found the clinic. It's empty, but there's something you need to know. Pierce left a file with your name on it. My stomach twisted. What's in it? Photos. Surveillance stills. He's been watching you since before you even met Ethan. He followed your case when you were being treated for fertility issues. You weren't random. He targeted you. I pressed a hand to my chest, gasping. Why? He wanted a family he could control, Harris said. Margaret was his obsession. You were her replacement. He engineered everything to bind you together. I felt the world tilt. The room dimmed, my vision narrowing to the faint outline of Sam in his crib. He cooed softly, unaware that his very existence was built on lies. When Ethan returned that evening, his clothes smelled like salt and smoke. "They didn't find him," he said quietly. "But they found blood. Not enough to confirm whose." He dropped into a chair, face hollow. "He's still out there," I nodded. Too drained to speak. Outside, rain began to fall, tapping softly against the window, steady, rhythmic, relentless. We sat there in silence, knowing our lives would never return to what they'd been. The truth had stolen that from us forever. 2 nights later, another envelope arrived, this time with no writing, no return address, and no postmark. Inside was a single flash drive labeled, "For the Mother." The envelope was thin, pale, and unmarked. It had been slipped through the letterbox sometime during the night. No postage, no fingerprints visible, no writing except a faint indentation, the pressure of someone's hand as they'd pushed it through. I stood in the hallway staring at it for what felt like an hour, afraid to touch it. The morning light was cold, washing the house in that gray-blue stillness before dawn. Ethan hadn't woken yet. Sam slept peacefully upstairs. Finally, I crouched and picked it up. Inside was a single flash drive, black, unlabeled, except for a strip of tape that read, in faint block letters, "For the Mother." My heart thudded so hard it hurt. When Ethan came down, rubbing his eyes, I was still standing in the kitchen with it in my hand. He stopped mid-step. "What's that?" "It came through the door," I whispered. He frowned. "No postage?" I shook my head. He moved closer, studying it like it might bite. "Don't plug it in yet. Could be a virus, a tracker, anything." But I was already walking to the laptop. "Claire, wait. I have to know." I plugged it in. For a moment, nothing. Then the screen flickered. A single file appeared, "Play me MP4." Ethan swallowed hard. "Don't," but I clicked it anyway. The video opened with static. Then an image came into focus. A room I didn't recognize. Dimly lit, sterile. White walls, a metal table. Someone was recording from a handheld camera. A man stepped into frame. Dr. Pierce. He looked older, thinner, but his voice was the same. Calm, polished, deliberate. "Hello, Claire," he said. "If you're watching this, then you've uncovered the truth. Good. You always had a curious mind." I felt Ethan's hand tighten around mine. Pierce smiled faintly. "You see, family isn't about blood. It's about control, the ability to shape someone's life before they even realize it's happening." Margaret understood that. She wanted perfection. I simply gave her the tools. He leaned closer to the camera. "You were never supposed to suffer. You were supposed to continue the legacy. A mother to carry on what Margaret and I began." My stomach twisted. He turned and gestured toward something off-screen. The camera panned, and there she was, Margaret, alive. She sat in a wheelchair, wrapped in a blanket, her face pale and thin but unmistakable. Her eyes lifted to the camera, calm, cold, knowing. "Hello, dear," she said softly. "I told you a mother never leaves her child," Ethan gasped, stumbling back from the screen. "No, that's impossible." She was dead. I couldn't speak. My throat locked. Margaret smiled faintly. "You always underestimated me. But it's time to stop running, Claire. Bring him to me. Bring my grandson home." Pierce stepped beside her again. "You have 7 days. There's no need for violence, just compliance. When the time comes, you'll know where to go." The video ended. The screen went black. I sat frozen, my hand still hovering near the keyboard. My breath came shallow, uneven. Ethan was pacing, running his hands through his hair, muttering, "This can't be real." "She's dead." I saw the reports. Harris saw the reports, but deep down, I already knew. Margaret had always been 10 steps ahead. And Pierce, he'd made sure death was just another illusion. Ethan turned to me. "We need to go to Harris. Now." I nodded, grabbing my coat, clutching Sam's blanket against my chest as if it could keep us safe. At the station, Harris watched the video in silence. When it ended, he rubbed his temples. That's not recent footage, at least a few months old based on Margaret's condition. But it confirms what we feared. She's alive, Ethan said flatly. Harris nodded. And she's with Pierce. They've been planning this. The timing of the messages, the threats, it all lines up. They want you scared. They want you isolated. They said 7 days, I whispered. What happens in 7 days? He looked at me gravely. We don't wait to find out. We move first. Over the next few days, the house turned into a fortress. Police patrols rotated outside, cameras covered every angle, and plainclothes officers shadowed our every move. But no one could protect us from the fear. Ethan barely slept. I kept Sam in my arms almost constantly. Every knock on the door, every unfamiliar sound made us both jump. On the 5th night, Harris called with an update. We've traced the video file's metadata. It was uploaded from a private medical facility. Abandoned, technically. About 50 miles north. Used to belong to Pierce's clinic before it shut down. Ethan's voice was tight. Then that's where they are. Harris hesitated. We'll send a team, but I need you two to stay put. They've already proven how far they'll go. We can't risk you walking into another trap, I agreed. But even as I hung up, a part of me knew waiting wouldn't save us. That night, I woke to a faint sound. Soft, rhythmic, almost soothing, humming. Margaret's lullaby. It drifted through the baby monitor again, low and distant, like it was coming from somewhere beneath the floor. I bolted upright. Ethan, he was already awake, his eyes wide. We both froze. Listening, the humming stopped. Then, from the monitor, a voice, faint, cracked, but clear. He belongs to me, Claire. I dropped the monitor. My pulse roaring in my ears, Ethan snatched it up. Staring at the screen, static. Then silence. He whispered, "She's close." The next second, the power went out, the lights, the heat, everything gone. We were plunged into darkness. Outside, the wind howled, and then from the front porch came the slow creak of footsteps. One after another, getting closer. As the door handle began to turn, I realized Margaret and Pierce weren't waiting for us to come to them anymore. They'd come to take what they believed was theirs. The power cut so suddenly it felt like the house inhaled and held its breath. For one moment, the world was pitch black. No hum of the refrigerator, no whir of the heater, just the raw whisper of wind pressing against the windows. Ethan was already on his feet. "Stay with Sam," he said, voice tight, but I couldn't move. I could hear it, slow, deliberate footsteps on the porch. The boards groaned with each step, then silence, a faint metallic scrape followed. The front door handle twisting, Ethan grabbed the baseball bat from behind the couch and motioned for me to stay back. My heart hammered so hard I could feel it in my teeth. Sam whimpered in my arms, sensing the tension. The next sound was the smallest click, a lock giving way. The door creaked open, letting in a sliver of moonlight. "Police will be here any minute," Ethan shouted into the dark. "Get out!" No answer, then a voice, calm, almost tender. "Ethan, please!" "You don't have to be afraid. It's only me. Margaret." My blood turned to ice. Ethan froze. "Mom?" Her silhouette appeared in the doorway, thin and trembling. She stepped inside, rainwater dripping from her coat. The faintest scent of lavender filled the air. She smiled faintly. "You kept the house just the way I liked it." Ethan's voice cracked. "You shouldn't be here. You're supposed to be dead?" she finished. That was the idea. I stepped forward, clutching Sam close. "What do you want?" She turned her head toward me slowly, her eyes catching the pale glow from the streetlights outside. "You already know what I want." Behind her, another shape appeared, taller, broader, Dr. Pierce, his expression calm, almost clinical. He carried something under his arm, a black duffel bag. "Don't," Ethan warned, raising the bat. Pierce lifted a hand. "No one needs to get hurt. We only came for the child." I tightened my grip on Sam. "You're not taking him." Margaret's voice softened. "You can't protect him, Claire. not from what's in his blood. He belongs with us, where he was meant to be. Ethan moved between us. Over my dead body, Pierce sighed as though disappointed. That can be arranged. He reached into the bag. Ethan swung. The bat cracked against the duffel, sending papers flying. Medical files, vials, syringes. Pierce stumbled back, snarling, "Enough of this!" Margaret cried out, "Stop! Don't hurt him!" Ethan shoved her aside and grabbed my arm. "Run!" We sprinted toward the back door, but a flash of movement stopped us, Pierce slamming it shut. "You think I'd leave you an exit?" I turned, eyes darting to the stairs. "Upstairs." Ethan nodded, pulling me along. We took the steps 2 at a time, hearts pounding. Margaret's voice floated up after us, almost sing-song. "Don't make this harder, dear. A mother always gets her child in the end." We reached the bedroom and locked the door. Ethan jammed a chair under the handle. The flashlight beam shook in his hand. "She's insane," I whispered. "She's not the problem," he said. "He is." Below, footsteps creaked again. Pierce's deliberate rhythm. Ethan looked at me. "Take Sam. Climb out the window onto the roof. The patrol car's outside. If you see them, yell, 'I'm not leaving you.'" He cupped my face. "You have to. If they get him..." A loud crack cut him off, the front door bursting open wider. The sound of boots, Pierce's voice, sharper now. "Bring me the child, Ethan, or everyone dies here tonight." Ethan kissed my forehead once. Hard. "Go." I climbed out the window, clutching Sam, the cold air biting at my skin. The roof tiles were slick with rain. Below, the driveway glimmered under the half-dead streetlight, and I saw flashing blue. A police car. Relief surged through me. "Harris!" I screamed. "We're upstairs." Gunfire exploded from inside the house. 1, 2, then 3 deafening shots. I screamed again, shielding Sam as shouts filled the night. Officers stormed through the front door. More gunfire, a crash, someone yelling, "He's armed! Drop it!" Then silence, only the sound of rain. Moments later, Harris appeared below, shouting up, "Claire!" "It's over. It's safe to come down." I didn't move until they helped me off the roof. Sam whimpered softly against my chest, his tiny fingers gripping my coat. Inside, the living room was chaos, broken glass, overturned furniture, and the faint smell of gunpowder. Pierce lay on the floor, blood dark against the carpet, motionless. Margaret knelt beside him, sobbing quietly, her hands shaking. "You promised me," she whispered to his body. "You said we'd be a family." Harris approached her carefully. "It's done, Margaret. It's over." She looked up at him with eyes that seemed almost empty. A mother's work is never over. Then she smiled faintly, too faint to tell if it was grief or madness, and collapsed. Medics rushed in, voices overlapping, but I turned away. Ethan was sitting by the stairs, dazed but alive. I dropped beside him, clutching his arm. He looked at me, eyes wet, voice hoarse. "Is he okay?" I nodded. "He's safe." He pulled us both into his arms and held on like he never wanted to let go. For the first time in months, I felt the smallest sense of something I hadn't dared to believe in anymore. Relief. By sunrise, the bodies were gone, the evidence collected. The tape stretched across our front door again. Harris promised it was finally over. But as the medics carried Margaret out, I saw her hand. Clutched between her fingers was another folded note, stained with blood. Harris pried it free and handed it to me. "You should see this." The handwriting was faint but clear. The legacy lives through him. "Protect our son." I stared at it, feeling the ground tilt beneath me. Ethan whispered, "What does that mean?" I didn't answer, because deep down I already knew. Whatever Pierce and Margaret had started didn't die with them. Weeks later, as I tried to rebuild our life, strange things began happening around Sam, things no doctor could explain. It was then I realized Margaret's warning wasn't madness at all. It was prophecy. Weeks passed, though time felt strange now, stretched, hollow, untrustworthy. The investigation had ended, the case officially closed. Dr. Samuel Pierce and Margaret Ellis were both declared dead at the scene. Harris called it an ending, but endings, I learned, don't always mean peace. The house was quiet again, almost too quiet. The broken glass was gone, the walls repainted, the floors replaced, but silence carried its own kind of echo, one that whispered when the world slept. Ethan threw himself into fixing what he could. Repairs, paperwork, therapy. He needed structure. It helped him forget. But I couldn't forget. I didn't want to forget. Because sometimes when I watched Sam sleep, I saw it. The tiniest shadow of someone else in his face. His lashes too dark, his expressions too measured, his gaze holding just a little too long. Pierce's words haunted me. The legacy lives through him. At first, I tried to push it away. A mother's paranoia, the residue of trauma. But the signs grew harder to ignore. It began with the lullaby. One afternoon, while folding laundry, I heard it again, the same tune Margaret used to hum. Faint, melodic, coming from the baby monitor. I froze, heart hammering. I walked to the nursery, every step heavy with dread. Sam was sitting upright in his crib. Humming softly to himself, he shouldn't have known that melody. He stopped when he saw me, smiling, eyes wide and innocent. "Mama," he said in his tiny voice. I tried to smile back, but my throat tightened. "Where did you learn that, sweetheart?" He tilted his head. "Grandma sing." My blood went cold. "She sang to me, Mama." I forced a laugh. "You mean on the monitor, right?" He just smiled again and turned toward the corner of the room, as if listening. I told myself he'd overheard it from old recordings, from my humming unconsciously, from memory itself. Children absorbed things. They echoed what they sensed. That's what the book said. But the next incident tore through logic like paper. One night, Ethan and I were woken by a noise, a faint tapping sound. When I checked the monitor, I saw Sam standing in his crib, eyes open, facing the wall. He was tapping 3 times, pause, 3 times again. A pattern, Ethan frowned. He's probably dreaming. But then, through the static of the monitor, we heard it. A faint whisper. "Good boy." Ethan tore down the hallway. The room was empty except for Sam, who turned and smiled when we burst in. "Grandma happy," he said. Harris visited the next morning when I called him. Ashamed and afraid of how it sounded, he listened patiently, his expression unreadable. "I know it feels like she's still here," he said. "But trauma does that. The mind plays tricks." "This isn't trauma," I said sharply. "She's in his head." "Somehow she's still in him," he sighed. "Claire, I'm not crazy," I snapped, louder than I meant to. He hesitated, then said gently, "We found something in Pierce's lab. Files about neural conditioning. Experiments on infants. Genetic imprinting tied to sound and memory. We don't know how far he got, but..." He stopped himself, then added, "Maybe you're right to be cautious." He left me with a look that was equal parts pity and fear. Days turned into weeks. The house began to feel smaller, like it was folding in around us. Ethan tried to stay optimistic, but even he was starting to see it. The way Sam's mood changed whenever the lullaby played on the radio. How his eyes seemed to darken when someone mentioned Margaret's name. Then one evening while I was cooking, I heard him laughing softly in the living room. I peeked around the corner. Sam sat cross-legged on the floor, facing the empty couch, giggling like someone was tickling him. "Who are you talking to, baby?" I asked, smiling carefully. He pointed to the air beside him. "Grandma." Ethan came in behind me, his expression tight. "That's enough, buddy. Grandma's gone, remember?" Sam looked up, serious now. "No, she here." "Sam," he frowned, eyes filling with tears. "Don't say that. Grandma says you bad." Then his face twisted in a way I'd never seen before. Something older, colder, far too knowing. "She says you both bad." I dropped the spoon. The metal hit the floor with a clatter that echoed through the room. Ethan grabbed Sam, pulling him close. "That's enough. Bedtime." But as he carried him upstairs, I could still hear Sam whispering softly, words I couldn't make out. When Ethan came back down, his face was pale. "What did he say?" I asked. He hesitated. He said, "She's coming back for me." That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window staring at the backyard. The moonlight painted everything silver and strange. And then, movement, a flicker near the trees. A shadow too tall to be wind, too still to be imagination. I blinked hard, my heart racing. The figure turned, and for just a second I saw her, Margaret, pale, watching. When I gasped, she smiled. Then the night swallowed her. I ran outside, barefoot, the grass cold under my feet. The yard was empty. No footprints. No sound. But on the porch swing, something moved in the breeze. A small stuffed rabbit. The one from the first package months ago. Pinned to its ear was a note. "You can't stop blood from remembering." I sank to my knees, the world spinning. The next morning, I told Ethan we needed to leave. The house, the town, everything. But he shook his head. "If we run, she'll follow." "You know she will. So what do we do?" He looked at Sam, who sat on the floor quietly drawing circles on a piece of paper. "We fight back," Ethan said. "How?" He picked up the drawing. The circles overlapped, forming something that looked almost like an eye. "She wants control," he said. "Then we take it from her." But even as he said it, I saw the faintest movement in Sam's reflection on the window, a flicker of someone else's smile curving his lips, and I knew that whatever lived inside him wasn't just memory, it was inheritance. A week later, I found a new recording on the baby monitor, a voice neither mine nor Ethan's, softly saying, "He remembers." The morning light looked wrong that day, too pale, too sharp. It filtered through the blinds in thin, surgical lines, slicing the room into pieces of gold and shadow. Sam was awake before me, sitting cross-legged on the floor, humming softly to himself. The same lullaby. Margaret's lullaby. I stayed perfectly still, pretending to sleep, just watching. He was tracing something on the floorboards with his fingertip, over and over, small looping motions, circular and precise. When I leaned closer, I saw what it was. An M. He looked up and smiled when he saw me watching. "Morning, Mama," I forced a smile. "Morning, sweetheart. Grandma says it's a pretty day." My throat tightened. "Sam, we talked about that. Grandma's gone, remember?" He frowned, shaking his head. "No, she's here. She says Daddy's not listening." I felt my pulse spike. "What does that mean?" He just tilted his head and whispered, "You'll see." Ethan didn't want to talk about it anymore. He'd started locking himself in the office late at night, claiming he was reviewing legal papers. But I knew he was just trying to drown the fear with something practical, something measurable. When I told him what Sam said that morning, he brushed it off. "He's 4, Claire. He says whatever pops into his head. Don't read into it. He's 3, Ethan," I said softly. "And he's saying things he shouldn't even understand." He rubbed his temples. "We can't keep doing this. We need to move on. Margaret and Pierce are gone." I wanted to believe him, but I'd seen that smile in Sam's eyes. It wasn't mine. It wasn't Ethan's. It was hers. 3 nights later, the humming started again, faint through the baby monitor just after midnight. I froze, heart pounding, listening. Then another voice joined it. Low, rhythmic, familiar. Pierce. My skin went cold. "He remembers, Margaret," the voice said softly. "He's almost ready." I nearly dropped the monitor. I ran to Sam's room, burst through the door. He was sitting up in bed, perfectly still, eyes wide open, whispering words I couldn't make out. When I turned on the light, he blinked and smiled, as though waking from a dream. "Grandma says we don't need lights anymore." The next morning, Ethan found me sitting on the edge of the bed, still holding the monitor. My hands hadn't stopped shaking. "We have to take him somewhere," I said. "A hospital. A specialist. Something," Ethan sighed, weary. "And tell them what? That he's being haunted by your dead mother-in-law?" They'll think we're both insane, I glared at him. Then what's your plan? He hesitated. Harris gave me something. Some of Pierce's old research files. I've been reading through them. There's mention of an experimental implant, something designed to store cognitive patterns in infants. If Pierce used it, I felt my stomach twist. You're saying he could have downloaded her? Not downloaded, he said quietly. Imprinted. Like memory residue and encoded on a neural frequency. I stared at him. You sound like him. He looked away. I'm trying to understand this before it's too late. By evening, the house had that eerie stillness again, the kind that made every noise feel deliberate. The hum of the refrigerator, the creak of wood, even the wind through the trees felt like someone breathing just out of sight. Ethan was in the office. Sam was napping. I sat in the living room staring at the monitor. Then the screen flickered. Static. And through the crackling came her voice. Claire. I froze. You can't keep him forever. He's mine, I stood, backing away. Leave us alone, I whispered. The static hissed louder. Then her voice again, softer now. You carried him. But I made him. The monitor shut off. A second later, Sam screamed upstairs. I bolted up the stairs 2 at a time. His room door was open, the curtains whipping from an open window. Sam! He sat in the middle of the floor, shaking. Grandma hurt Daddy. What? I gasped. He pointed toward the hallway. I ran. The office door was open, papers everywhere, computer toppled, the lamp shattered. Ethan was slumped against the desk, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. I dropped to my knees. Ethan, can you hear me? He groaned, eyes fluttering open. She's not gone. What happened? She was here, Claire, he said weakly. I saw her in the reflection. She said it's already done. Already done? He looked at me with hollow eyes. She said, he's becoming her. The next few days blurred. The doctor said Ethan's injury was minor, a concussion from hitting the desk. But what terrified me most was his silence afterward. He barely spoke, barely looked at Sam. Meanwhile, Sam's drawings grew darker. Circles and lines that looked like medical symbols, things no child should know. One afternoon, he handed me a paper and said, Grandma showed me. It was an exact sketch of the implant Ethan had found in Pierce's research. Every wire, every mark. Perfect, precise. I called Harris that night, voice shaking. She's still here. She's inside him. He didn't hesitate this time. Pack your things. We'll move you to protective custody until we figure this out. But before we could leave, the power flickered again, and from the dark hallway, a child's voice echoed softly, layered, distorted. Both Sam's and someone else's at once. Don't take me away from her. When I turned, Sam stood at the end of the hall, his shadow stretching impossibly long behind him. His eyes caught the faint light, and for a heartbeat, they weren't blue anymore. They were brown, Margaret's brown, he smiled. Mommy, don't be scared. Grandma says it's my turn to take care of you. I backed away slowly, whispering, Sammy, baby, please. He tilted his head. It's okay. Grandma's here now. The air grew cold. The hallway lights flickered once, twice, then went out completely, and from the dark, I heard them both. My son's laughter and her voice blending together. A mother never leaves her child. When the lights came back on, Sam was gone. And what he left behind proved that Margaret hadn't just taken over his mind. She'd rewritten his blood. The house was silent, but it wasn't empty. Sam's toys were still scattered across the floor. A wooden truck, a blue crayon, the stuffed rabbit that had reappeared again without explanation. Only Sam was missing. The police searched the entire neighborhood. Dogs, drones, everything. They found no footprints, no tire tracks, no sign of forced entry. Just one thing left behind on Sam's pillow. A single strand of gray hair and the faint smell of lavender. Margaret. Ethan stood in the hallway, shaking, one hand braced against the wall. She took him, he said flatly. She actually took him. Detective Harris's voice came over the radio, calm but urgent. We traced movement on the street cameras. A woman in a dark coat, carrying what looks like a child, headed east. Toward the coast, the same direction as the Cliffside Lodge, the place where Margaret had supposedly died. I felt the room tilt. That's where she started everything. That's where she'll end it. Ethan turned to me. Then that's where we go. The drive was a blur of headlights, wind, and fear. Harris led the convoy, his car lights cutting through the fog ahead. The ocean grew louder as we neared the cliffs, restless, endless, and angry. When we reached the old lodge, the smell of salt and smoke hit me like a memory. The cottage was gone, burned to its skeleton. But through the mist, the faint glow of candlelight shimmered from the ruins. "She's inside," I whispered. Ethan stepped closer, jaw clenched. "We end this tonight." Harris motioned for his team to spread out. "Stay behind me." "If she's here, she's unpredictable." But as we crept closer, a voice echoed through the air, soft, almost kind. "You shouldn't have come, Claire." I froze. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, carried by the wind. "You keep trying to take what's mine. Where is he?" I shouted. "Where's my son?" Laughter, gentle, familiar, haunting. "He's safe. He's with me. Where he belongs." The candlelight flickered inside the ruins. We stepped through what was once the doorway, and there he was. Sam stood in the center of the room, barefoot, wearing his little red pajamas. His eyes glowed faintly gold in the candlelight. He was humming the lullaby, the same one I'd heard through the monitor, the same one Margaret used to hum when she thought no one was listening. "Sammy," I whispered, tears stinging my eyes. "It's Mommy. Come here, sweetheart." He tilted his head, smiling. But it wasn't his smile. Margaret's voice came from his lips. "Mommy, you came back." Ethan's hand tightened on my shoulder. "Oh my God." Harris raised his weapon, but I grabbed his arm. "No!" "Don't." Sam, or whatever was inside him, took a step forward. The air around us grew heavier, colder. "You should be grateful," he said in that soft, chilling voice. "He'll live forever now." "Through me." "Through us." I shook my head, tears spilling down my cheeks. "You're not her. You're not him." "Oh, but I am," the voice replied. "He's my blood. My creation. My legacy." Ethan stepped forward, anger trembling in his voice. "You stole his life. You destroyed ours. You think that's love?" Sam smiled faintly. "Love is control." Harris whispered. "Claire, we have to act. Now." But something in me knew force wouldn't work. Not this time. I dropped to my knees, meeting Sam's eyes. Margaret's eyes. "You wanted a family, Margaret. You wanted peace. But look what you've become." The smile faltered. For a moment, the child's eyes flickered blue again. I pressed on. "You said a mother never leaves her child. Then let him go. If you ever loved him, let him go." The candles flickered violently. The air trembled. Sam clutched his head, crying out. One voice breaking into two, Margaret's and his overlapping in a haunting chorus. Ethan shouted, "He's fighting her!" "Sammy, listen to me," I cried. "You're stronger than her. You're my son. Come back to me!" He screamed, falling to his knees. The ground trembled beneath us, and then from the shadows Pierce appeared, or what was left of him. His face half-burned, his eyes wild. He moved toward us, limping, muttering, "You can't stop evolution." "She's perfect now," Harris fired, hitting him square in the chest. Pierce fell backward, crashing into the candles, knocking them across the floor. The flames caught instantly, racing along the wooden beams. "Claire, we have to go," Ethan yelled, pulling me toward the door, but I couldn't leave. Not yet. Sam was still on the floor, trembling, whispering through tears. "Mommy, help me." "She's inside." I dropped beside him, cupping his face. "Look at me, baby. Remember the song I used to sing before you slept? Just the two of us?" He nodded weakly. "Sing it with me," I said. Together we began to hum. slow, shaky, but real. The melody filled the burning room, clashing with the roar of the fire. For a heartbeat, I felt it, the weight lift. Then Sam gasped, his little body arching, eyes flickering between blue and brown, and finally, blue. He went limp in my arms. Ethan ran to us, coughing through the smoke. Is he? He's breathing, I said, sobbing. She's gone. She's gone. Harris pulled us both out just as the ceiling gave way. The flames swallowed the last of the lodge, the sea wind carrying the ashes into the dark. We stood by the cliff, the sky glowing orange holding our sun between us. Ethan whispered, "It's over." But as I looked down at Sam, still unconscious, I wasn't sure, because faintly, in the distance carried by the wind, I swore I heard her voice again. A mother never leaves her child. 3 weeks later, Sam began drawing again, circles, symbols, and one word over and over. When I asked him what it meant, he smiled and said, "It's where Grandma sleeps." 3 weeks passed, and for the first time since the fire, the sea outside our window sounded calm. It lapped softly against the cliffs, as if the waves themselves were finally tired of screaming, but peace can lie. Sam was quieter now. He barely spoke, barely laughed. Some nights I'd wake up and find him sitting by the window, staring out toward the water. That was when he started drawing the same word again and again, in notebooks, on napkins, on the fogged-up glass of the windows. Below, at first, I thought it was something he'd heard from us, or from the officers. But every time I asked him, he'd smile faintly and say, "That's where Grandma sleeps." Ethan wanted to take him back to the hospital. "Maybe it's psychological," he said. "Maybe the trauma's making him see things." But I knew better. Every instinct inside me whispered it wasn't trauma. It was calling. Margaret wasn't gone. She was waiting. 2 nights later, I woke up to the sound of the baby monitor again. That familiar low hum followed by breathing that wasn't Sam's. Then, softly her voice, "You shouldn't have taken him from me." I froze. Ethan stirred beside me. "What is it?" I held the monitor out so he could hear. "Bring him home, Claire." "To where it began." "To where I'm waiting." Ethan sat up, his face pale. "She's dead." "Then explain this," I whispered. The voice came again, closer now, sharper. Below, the monitor went silent. We didn't sleep that night. By morning, Ethan made a decision. We end this. Whatever's left of her, whatever's pulling him, we finish it. "Finish it how?" I asked. He looked out the window toward the cliffs. "We go back." "To the sea," I shook my head. "That's what she wants." "Maybe," he said softly, "but it's the only way to stop her." By sunset, we were standing at the edge of the cliff where the lodge once stood. The ruins were gone now, cleared by investigators, but the foundation remained. Blackened stone, twisted beams, and the faint smell of salt and ash. The wind was strong, biting. The waves crashed far below, spraying the rocks with mist. Sam stood between us, holding my hand. He looked small, fragile, but there was something calm in his face, something I couldn't understand. "She's here," he said quietly. Ethan knelt beside him. "Where, buddy?" He pointed toward the cliff's edge. "Down there. She says we have to come," my heart pounded. "No, Sam, we're not going down there." "She says you promised." "Promised what?" Ethan asked. Sam looked up, his blue eyes glinting gold for just a second. "To let her go." A rumble rolled beneath our feet, deep, low, unnatural. The ground seemed to breathe. Harris's warning echoed in my head. The body was never recovered from the sea. And I knew. She wasn't waiting below. She was part of it now. Before I could move, Sam broke free from my hand and ran toward the edge. "Sam!" I screamed. Ethan lunged and grabbed him just in time, pulling him back. The rocks crumbled under their feet, falling into the ocean below. The sound of the waves grew louder. Or maybe it wasn't the waves. Maybe it was her. You can't keep him, Claire, the voice whispered through the wind. You were only ever meant to carry him. I shook my head, tears streaming down my face. You're wrong. He's my son. Ethan shouted into the wind. You're gone! You don't get to control us anymore. But the sea answered back, rising higher, frothing and snarling like a living thing. I felt it then. The pull. Not physical, but inside me. A presence tugging at my thoughts, my heartbeat, whispering my name. Let me in, Claire. It doesn't have to end this way. I fell to my knees, gripping the cold stone. No, you can't have him. He's already mine. Behind me, Sam's voice changed. Softer. Lower. Mommy, don't fight her. It hurts? Ethan dropped beside him, shaking him gently. Sammy, stay with me. But when the boy looked up, it wasn't Sam's gaze. It was hers. Margaret's voice slipped through his mouth like smoke. Don't you see? This was always the plan, I screamed, grabbing him by the shoulders. Get out of him! Get out! The wind howled, drowning my words. Then I remembered something from Pierce's research. Ethan's late-night notes about resonance, about the neural frequency of memory. If her consciousness was inside him, maybe it could be broken, overwritten. Ethan! I shouted over the roar. The lullaby, it's her key. If we end it, we end her. He understood immediately. Together, we began to sing. The same lullaby she'd used to haunt us. The same one I'd reclaimed that night in the fire. Our voices trembled, fighting through the storm. Sam screamed, clutching his head. His little body shaking violently. The sky cracked with thunder. The sea exploded upward in white spray. Keep going, Ethan shouted. Don't stop. I sang louder, my throat raw, tears blinding me. And then Sam went still. His eyes rolled back. For a terrifying moment, I thought I'd lost him. But when he looked up again, his eyes were blue. Only blue, Mommy? He whispered. I sobbed, pulling him into my arms. It's okay, baby. It's over. The wind eased. The sea calmed. The air felt lighter, cleaner, but then Ethan gasped. Claire? Behind us, the ground split open, a jagged crack tearing through the cliffside, and from the depths came her voice one last time, weaker now, fading but full of venom. You can't erase me. I am in his blood. I held Sam tighter. Then I'll love him until there's nothing of you left. The crack sealed shut with a sound like thunder. The waves swallowed the last of the light, and then silence. The drive home was quiet. Sam slept in the back seat, peaceful for the first time in months. Ethan reached over, taking my hand. You did it, he said softly. You saved him. I looked at the horizon, where the last trace of orange faded into gray. Maybe, I whispered. Or maybe she just went deeper. 2 months later, on Sam's birthday, he asked to visit the ocean again. As the waves crashed softly in the distance, he smiled and whispered, She says thank you for setting her free. The sky over the coast was the color of faded silver the morning we returned. 2 months had passed since the cliff split open, swallowing Margaret's voice into the sea. The ocean looked different now, quieter, but not empty. It breathed, in long, slow waves, as if exhaling all that it had kept hidden. Sam held my hand as we walked the familiar path down to the water. His small boots left prints in the damp sand. He hummed under his breath, softly, without realizing it. The lullaby, not haunting this time, just gentle. Ethan trailed a few steps, behind, carrying the picnic basket he'd insisted on bringing, trying to make the day feel ordinary. We'd promised ourselves this trip would be about healing. But the truth was, we both needed to see the sea again, to make sure it wasn't whispering anymore. Sam stopped at the shoreline, watching the foam crawl up to his toes. Grandma's quiet today, he said simply. Ethan and I exchanged a look. I knelt beside him. Do you still hear her, sweetheart? He thought for a moment, then nodded. Sometimes. But she doesn't sound mad now. She just sings. What does she sing? I asked, my throat tightening. He smiled, eyes bright with childlike peace. Happy songs. I reached out and brushed his hair from his face. That's good, baby. That's very good. He turned his gaze back to the horizon. She said you were brave, Mommy. I froze. She said thank you. My heart ached in that strange, heavy way that comes after long fear, the kind of ache that feels almost like relief. Did she say anything else? He shook his head. She said she's tired now. She's going to sleep under the water. For the first time in months, I let myself breathe fully. The sea breeze smelled clean, salt and rain, not ash or lavender. Ethan spread a blanket on the sand and called for us to sit. We ate in quiet contentment. Peanut butter sandwiches, strawberries, the smallest taste of something normal. For a while, I let myself forget the rest. The fire, the hospital, the research files, the nights spent listening to static. For a while, I was just a mother with her family by the ocean. When the sun began to dip, painting the water gold, Sam grew sleepy. He curled up beside me, his head on my lap, fingers clutching the hem of my sweater. Ethan lay back on the blanket, eyes closed. We made it, he said quietly. I looked out at the water. Did we? He opened one eye. You still think she's out there? I hesitated. I think people like her don't just disappear. They linger, in the air, in memories, in blood. He reached for my hand. Then we keep living anyway. That's how we win. As twilight deepened, I began to hum, not Margaret's version, the twisted lullaby she'd used to haunt and control, but my own. Softer, slower, whole again. Sam stirred slightly, murmuring in his sleep. Ethan smiled. You haven't sung that in a while. I know, I whispered. I stopped because I thought it belonged to her. And now? I looked down at our sun, peaceful and warm against my knees. Now it belongs to us. The tide rolled in, touching the edge of the blanket, before sliding back again, like a heartbeat syncing with ours. Later, when the stars came out, we packed up. Ethan carried Sam to the car, his tiny arms draped around his father's shoulders. I lingered at the shoreline for a moment longer. The sea was calm now, only small waves breaking softly against the rocks. The moonlight shimmered across it like a path leading somewhere far below. I whispered into the wind. Rest now, Margaret. For a long while, nothing answered. Then, just as I turned to leave, I heard the faintest hum rise from the water. A single note of the lullaby. Not cruel, not commanding, just tender. A mother's goodbye. The drive home was silent except for the radio, old songs fading in and out through static. Sam slept the whole way, head against the window, breathing steady. Ethan reached over and took my hand again. Do you think he'll remember any of it when he's older? I stared out at the dark horizon. Maybe not the details, but I think he'll always remember the song. He nodded. And you? I smiled faintly. I'll remember everything, because someone has to. Months passed. The world moved on. The papers stopped calling, and the house by the sea became home again. Sometimes, when the wind was just right, I'd hear the faint hum of the waves carrying that old tune. But it didn't scare me anymore. Sam was growing fast, curious, kind, filled with light. There were moments when he'd pause mid-play, looking off into nothing, a small smile curling at his lips. Once I asked, "Who are you thinking about, sweetheart?" He said, "Grandma. Do you miss her?" He nodded. A little, but she says she's happy now. She says you're brave. I hugged him tight. She's right. but so are you. One evening, after putting Sam to bed, I found myself alone by the window. The sea stretched endlessly beyond the glass, silver in the moonlight. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't afraid of it. I opened the baby monitor, not out of habit, but comfort. Static crackled softly, then steadied, and through the white noise I heard it, faint but unmistakable. A lullaby. Not hers. Mine. Sam's tiny voice joined it from the next room, half asleep, humming the same tune. For a moment I closed my eyes and let it wash over me. The fear, the love, the memories, all of it belonged here now, woven into the sound of the sea. The clock ticked softly behind me. The air smelled like salt and warmth. I whispered into the quiet, not to Margaret this time, but to myself. Some stories don't end with silence, I said. They end with song. And when I looked out at the horizon, I could almost see her, Margaret, standing at the water's edge, smiling, fading with the tide. I didn't hate her anymore. I didn't fear her, because I finally understood. What she wanted wasn't immortality. It was what every mother wants, to never be forgotten. I still hear her sometimes, in the wind, in the waves, in the soft hum of my son's voice. But now when I sing it back, it's mine again.